The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Over the weekend, a Bronx woman who says she was assaulted by a French dignitary in a Manhattan hotel for the first time publicly told her story of the alleged attack. And as the city tries to deal with the horrific dismembering of an 8-year-old Brooklyn boy, the DA is preparing its case against the alleged assailant. As maybe the Bronx's most well-known defense attorney, tonight's guest can talk about those cases, as well as his extensive experience defending tainted politicians like Efrain Gonzalez, Pedro Espada Jr., Larry Seabrook, and Gloria Davis. Our phones are open for you to ask questions or make comments. You can call us at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Tonight, please join me in welcoming back to Bronx Talk defense attorney, don't worry, Murray Richmond. How are you?
Hi,
Mr.
Gary.
Richmond,
how are you?
back.
My pleasure.
Well, I did the research, and in fact, this is your 6th appearance on our show in the 17 years. And you know, the last time you were on was way back in 2005.
I've missed you.
Well, we've missed you too. I think on that the last time that you were here on the show, we were talking about Guy Villela, the late Guy Villela. You defended him as well.
I defended his father, yes.
That's
and
right.
He was a very, very good friend of mine. I liked him.
Let's talk about the first case that I talked about at the top of the show, and I think it presents a whole range of issues. Nafissatou Diallo is the Bronx hotel chambermaid who said she was attacked by a French diplomat. His name, of course, Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Strauss-Kahn has been released because of her apparent questionable background. But if what she says is true, he belongs in jail. Under what circumstances can the case be reopened? Do you think it will be reopened? Give me some impression of what's going on with that.
Interestingly enough, and you didn't know this, I did an entire piece on this on French television.
There you go.
They came to me and they... But the reality is...
At what point? This was during the trial or after?
There was no trial.
That's true.
The week after the arrest, and I predicted what would happen. And then they were so impressed with that, after all. They came back and they spoke to me just 2 weeks ago, and it was just a French TV won.
And so you predicted that this case would have the kinds of problems that it ultimately had.
I stated that a man of this standing within our community, notwithstanding the fact that the charges were serious charges, would eventually go away. Based upon the background of the woman, they would develop that, the amount of money backing this man, and the circumstances under which this allegedly occurred. You know, the lawyer he has, Ben Brofman, is a person I know, a very good man, a very fine lawyer. He was not letting anything go. But interestingly enough, the facts as developed in this particular case were developed by the district attorney's office themselves. They had her on tape speaking to a man in prison saying, how can I make money on this? Is that the speech of a person who was injured? And in no case have I ever seen, you know, we're all sympathetic to this woman. You know, it's David and Goliath situation. But in no case have I ever seen a witness or a person who is a alleged victim campaign for a prosecution of a case. And this is what's going on right now. It's a campaign of Newsweek magazine, all the newspapers suddenly jumping on board. Something's wrong there.
Let me ask you a question. Did they have a wire on Strauss-Kahn during that period of time as well?
No.
Should they have?
No.
Well, why would they have a wire on the accuser but
they
not
didn't.
one? Well, you said they heard the phone call.
Fine, but you didn't ask me how they heard the phone call.
Because he was in prison.
The person she was speaking to
Was
was a
in
person
prison.
in prison,
Oh,
and
so
all
that's why.
calls are monitored.
All right. She lied on her tax returns. Her bank account was used by a drug dealer to launder money.
And that's the guy she was speaking to. How do I make money?
I understand that because she obviously has a financial problem. But nonetheless, regardless of all those things, this man might have attacked her.
True.
And this would suggest that anybody with money and power, et cetera, can behave like that. And because this woman is poor and has needs and says, gee, maybe this is my opportunity to make money, and also doesn't have the proper defense and may have a background that is less than stellar, that she is never going to be able to make a case like that stick.
Well, having a background less than stellar puts an issue of credibility. Let me pose a question to you, if I might. If you were a judge and a rich man and a poor person came before you, who should you favor?
I don't think I would favor either.
You're
I'd
not
listen
supposed
the
to
case.
favor either.
Right.
That's the proper way. Now, simply because this woman is poor, and simply because sympathy goes to her, because of the fact of the poor, and this rich guy may have abused his rights, which is unquestionably a difficult situation, do you necessarily favor that particular party? Everybody identifies with one side or another. We shouldn't be. We should let the facts fall where they may.
So I agree with that. Now, let's say that her talking and the things that I saw on television and the things that are in Newsweek this week and in today's Daily News, let's say that she's telling the truth about what happened in the room, that she was cleaning the room, the naked man came to her and literally forcibly abused her. Shouldn't those facts come out regardless of what her background, regardless of what she might have said on the phone to somebody else, et cetera, et cetera? Shouldn't we get a trial to try a guy who behaved like that in New York City?
You know, that's what they're campaigning for, because that will give them strength for the greater return of money later on.
Who they?
The victim's lawyer et al. That's their concern.
So you think she, despite all of this, she's still out for money?
I still believe that 100%.
She said on the news today she's not interested in any money, but she's interested in, that the truth be told and this man pay for his crimes. You don't believe that?
Not a word.
So you think, let's just say hypothetically, we're playing courtroom here. Hypothetically, if this would get closer to a trial, and he, of course, is a man whose image is very important to him, that at some point they would say, all right, we'll give you whatever it is, $250,000 or $1 million to make it go away, she would take that money.
Yes.
It's hard to argue with that reason,
Well,
but that doesn't mean that that's her motive for speaking up at this point.
I'm not suggesting to you that he's some kind of a saint. I'm not even suggesting to you that he didn't do what he's alleged to have done. I'm just suggesting to you that the difficulty will be for the prosecution to make the case based upon a fact that she's a historical liar and that she has claimed that she had been raped before, which was not the truth. She had claimed that she had been abused before, which was not the truth. She had claimed that she did not know the money was in her account, what the drug dealer was washing money, which was not the truth. You got a situation here where how do you determine which is a truth and which is a lie? You know the old expression, lying in one is lying in all. And here you have a person, you've got to separate the truth from the facts, and it's almost impossible.
The general public, I would think, and certainly I include myself in that category, would be interested in knowing that if a crime was committed, justice would be done. You and I have, in all those years way back when, had this conversation, I'm sure, on this program a number of times. And yet, you're willing to concede that Strauss-Kahn might have done this terrible thing, but you're saying he also might walk free. Doesn't that present a problem of those of us who would like to believe in our justice system, that we get people who commit crimes and send them to jail?
You know, justice doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a time and place. You know, a couple of weeks ago we had this horrible trial of Casey Anthony. And everybody was yelling and screaming that Casey Anthony got away with murder. She may have. But I had gone on television 2 or 3 weeks before, and on my radio show, which I have, which I will talk about later on.
You could go WVOX, you could say it, Wednesday afternoons at 2 o'clock.
The Don't Worry Murray show at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
We talk about crime all the time.
Yeah.
But here we had a situation in that particular case that I had stated that the prosecution failed to prove that the child was killed. The child was dead. We had assumptions that she was a lousy mother. She did some terrible things. But how did you prove that the child was murdered? that the child did not die in an accident. There was no effort to prove that. And this was poor. This is where they failed.
What is the general public supposed to think when they say, you know what, we ought to have justice in this country and we'd like to believe in our legal system to make it happen?
But justice is not coming from the television tube. Justice doesn't come from the media, because the media reports what they want to report. The persons in the courtroom are charged with the responsibility of being the judge and jury. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from what I believe in my gut, I think she did it. That's an idiot's point of view.
You and I were talking before the show about a number of cases and things that you've been involved in, and you've obviously, as a defense attorney, go up against DAs in the Bronx and other parts of the city. He's laughing. He loves to win.
I love to fight.
Apparently you do. Are district attorneys' offices being run properly? We saw in the Roger Clemens case, there's just a terrible mistake. A DA didn't do a good job in this Casey Anthony case.
I don't blame the prosecution in Casey Anthony, and nor am I enamored with the defense lawyer in Casey Anthony. They just overlooked the fact that they couldn't prove that issue.
The evidence wasn't there.
Wasn't there.
You know, I want to get a little inside, I would say inside baseball here, but inside lawyering. When you take on a case like let's say the Strauss-Kahn case or any others, and we're going to talk about that terrible story of Libby Kletsky in Brooklyn, do you ask your clients if they really did it? Do you ever say to them, look, tell me just so I know what the boundaries I have or what I'm dealing with? Do you ever say, come on, you tell me? I mean, client
no, I really
attorney privilege.
I do not do that.
You do not do that.
I ask them, tell me what you say happened. Do I represent persons who may have committed the crime? Of course I do. Because if I represented only persons who were totally innocent, there's not that many to go around. And there's a lot of lawyers out there. But the reality is that we have to hold the government's feet to the fire. The government must have the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They make the charges, they've got to prove it. We don't have to prove a thing. That's the American way. We forget that sometime. We forget that in our system. You know, Janet Malcolm in her book, The Journalist and the Murderer, said, and she's a journalist herself, never trust a journalist for their point of view. You'll never get an honest shake.
I feel put upon. I just came here to do my show. Here's an interesting question. And is there a case out there like of a well-known person, and you like to deal in high-profile cases, it's something you've done, that you would say, you know what, that person is so guilty, there's just nothing I can do with this, and I would walk away and not work that case?
I have done it more than one occasion.
Yeah. And what are the considerations in that circumstance?
The nature of the charges. You know, I'm a father of children, and I have grandchildren, and there are certain crimes that are so abhorrent to me that if a person comes to me and says, well, I like to do this and that, and you listen to what they're saying and you draw a conclusion, they haven't told you they have committed the crime, but a reasonable view of the evidence indicates that their nature is of such a heinous quality that it's upsetting to you.
And you couldn't even see yourself, despite the fact that you know you've defended people who might be guilty of crimes, you couldn't see yourself taking on a case.
You know, I have no difficulty with murder. Murder is...
Well, it's something that, frankly, you work in that realm.
I've made my bones, so to say, on murder. But certain crimes, you know, it's very disturbing.
Let's talk about this Levi Aaron, who appears to be, he's the suspect in that horrific killing of Libby Kletsky, the little 8-year-old boy in Brooklyn. He has already confessed. Number one, would you defend him if asked? And number two, how would you go about doing it?
First of all, I'd have difficulty. That would be a type of case
that you would turn away.
I would turn away. As I said, I'm a father of children and grandchildren, and I worry that
you worry. Don't worry, Murray.
Yeah, I worry. Well, bad choice of words. You're right there.
I caught you there. Right?
You got 1 point for you.
Thank you.
But it's a difficult case to handle emotionally. And you know, if you have no respect for your client and you have no respect for what he has done or understand where he may be coming from, and you see the vicious nature of what he did, with, you know, either he was quite mentally ill, or he was, you know, the law says that being mentally ill in and of itself is not a defense.
So how would you defend him? What would you present now if you were in that circumstance?
I perceive that the only defense he may have is a psychiatric defense. But, a psychiatric defense is, you got to prove that he couldn't tell right from wrong.
Supposedly that the details of his confession, and actually they've been publicized, I shouldn't even say, supposedly he said he was concerned about hiding the body. As I understand the way the rules are written, that shows that he could be competent because he understood that a crime was committed and he was trying to cover it up.
There's two standards.
And that would preclude an insanity plea.
It may or may not. Let me tell you, there's two standards. There's the McNaughton rule, 1898, which says at the time of the commission of the crime, you couldn't tell right from wrong. He has acknowledged that he was able to tell right from wrong.
So that's strike one against him, really.
Two, can he be of assistance to his lawyers in his own defense?
I think that in this case he probably could.
How do you know?
Well,
That's
because
the
he's
second
he's
step.
already talked about trying to get out of he knew he was allegedly guilty of something, and he tried to cover it up.
Yeah, but if indeed he was responding to what he perceived to be a higher authority, either the voice of God or some other person posing thereof, you'd have to question his ability to help his lawyers.
Let's go to the telephone. Our buddy Mark from Pelham Parkway joins us. Always nice to have you, Mark. You always have something to say.
Well, because Mr. Richmond's an expert, I'm going to lay out some things, and then I'd like his opinion on it.
Okay.
I think in the case of Strauss-Kahn,
Yes.
I think he was set up to a degree.
You think
And
he was
everything
set
is,
up?
Yes, and I think the other problem you have is that you have an overzealous district attorney who's trying to make his mark, and he lost the case with the two cops that were accused of rape right before that. And then you look at the case of the kids where the district attorney jumped when they had the Central Park jogger, and it was proven those kids did not do it.
Right.
And the city doesn't want to settle with them, even though they were innocent.
But-
and then you have another case. So my two questions are this. One, why is it when the district attorneys withhold information, you can't go after them? Because I think it's Linda Firestein, who was the DA who prosecuted those kids. She withheld evidence. It's been proven. But she's writing novels and
That's
everything.
an interesting
How come
point.
the son of
So
Sam Law
if
doesn't apply
Mr.
to her?
Rich, I got your point, Mark.
In the case of Strauss-Kahn, my question is, I believe, they picked on the wrong guy this time because he's got the power and the money to go after the city and the state for malicious prosecation on this.
Thank
because
you
they
very
didn't
much.
investigate her properly.
I'd be curious to know, Mark, did you see the young woman's confession today? Statement, excuse me. Got confused. Did you see her statement
Get into
today?
the country. She's a money launderer.
You didn't answer my question. Did you see her statement? Did you see her on television?
Yes, I saw her on TV.
And you didn't think that was credible?
Gary, no, because I deal with actors. Anybody who could coach her well to come out for 5 minutes, I can convince
You're entitled
that
to your
I was
opinion.
right.
That's the beauty of BronxTalk. So your point about DAs being kind of immune from that kind of malpractice, let's put it that way.
It's more than that. There's a big problem in DAs as of late. There's a case called Brady versus Maryland. It's a requirement of the prosecution when they secure information that is of an exculpatory nature, have a duty to turn it over to the defense. Sometimes DAs, in their urge to win, will suppress evidence. Recently, there was a case in Westchester County where the federal court stated that they had never seen a case with 36 violations in one particular case. But that's,
Should those attorneys, this was Mark's question, should those attorneys be subject to some kind of penalty or censure?
in theory, they are like every other lawyer. In practice, they're not. But if you recall the lacrosse kids down in Durham,
sure.
in Duke University, we had the district attorney hiding evidence that they were not involved in the case, and he ruined their reputations.
But wasn't he ultimately made to resign, if I remember correctly?
Yes, but is that sufficient punishment? When you're trying to, I believe that if somebody
So
sets
he
you up,
basically ruined their lives, and you're saying that his being made to resign was not sufficient punishment for that DA.
he was disbarred.
He was
But
disbarred.
Any DA that hides evidence that it results in the incarceration of a person should go to jail for a substantial period of time to understand that they're not immune from such conduct.
All right, we got a phone caller who I want to get to, and also I want to ask you about this. You, and this goes right along with what you're saying, you had urged your friend, Efren Gonzalez, to plead guilty. He then ultimately changed his plea and said that you didn't represent him properly. I have a number of specific questions, but I'll just open the floor to you. What would you like to say about what happened in that circumstance with Mr. Gonzalez?
Ephraim was a good friend. I had represented him on numerous occasions before. We had a disagreement as to what should be done. Then he changed. He took a plea, and then afterwards he didn't want to take the plea anymore. So he said that I, together with the judge, put pressure on him to take a plea.
Is it true?
Well, the Court of Appeals came down with a decision just on Friday, published in the Law Journal today, which says it was not true. And they stated without question that there was no truth to this whatever.
Do you think, especially somebody who knew or who knows Efren so well, that he just simply got scared because taking that plea was going to guarantee he was going to go to jail and he was grasping at straws so he wouldn't?
I don't want to, go on what's in his mind. I like Ephraim. I still consider him to be a friend. I'm disappointed in certain aspects of his behavior. But, he's doing time right now, and I don't want to heap, my judgment upon his problem right now.
Have you communicated with him?
No.
Because it ended badly, and I guess
I'm
just guessing that you feel badly about that.
Not because of that. He hasn't sought me out, and I haven't spoken to him since.
Right. All right. Let's go to the telephone. Our friend Bob from Riverdale joins us. Bob, nice to have you.
Gary, you basically took my thing.
Oh.
I was going to ask about plea bargains, but, if they're often recommended, and we know that workloads are they're high, and DAs often look for plea bargains. But I'm going to change my topic and go over to the Brooklyn Borough President, who got slapped with a $20,000 fine today for bringing his wife on 3 trips. And it was said that he was abusing his power as a public servant. Does Mr. Richmond believe that public servants should have the freedom to bring their spouses or get work, say, done on their houses or whatever?
A little bit,
nothing, or, should they be held to a higher standard?
Go ahead.
Should they be held to a higher...
You're talking to a gentleman who's about to go to try and defend Larry Seabrook and for accused of funneling more than $320,000 through his not-for-profit.
I'm not going there. The fact of the matter is, no, I don't believe a public servant should have any superior rights to anybody else. Should they be held to a higher standard? I'm not quite sure what standard there is for the rest of us. Not most of us have the opportunity to take our wives along or our girlfriends along on junkets that other people would have to pay for. So I think it's justified. If he shouldn't have done it, then he has to pay the price.
I do want to mention Larry Seabrook again. He is.
I won't discuss it
because you have that trial is coming up.
I can't discuss it. It's an ongoing matter.
All right. I'm going to read this to our viewers about. I just pulled this up out of the internet. They said at one trial involving multiple defendants, Richmond used the sleeping defendant routine. He had his client sleep through the entire trial, a tactic that made the seemingly drowsy defendant come across as an unlikely trigger man. He also managed to convince the jury that a murder victim accidentally fell on his client's knife 7 times. How far would you go to win a case, and is everything in play that you can do to win a case?
Only the truth. I create situations where I create a supposition. In this particular case that you spoke about, the sleeping defendant routine, was the Westchester Premier Theater case, the one involving Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, if you recall. And they had a mob, and the other aspects of the Warner Communications were involved in running the theater. And I had a client that I couldn't differentiate from the rest of the people sitting around the table. They all wore suits, and they looked like a bunch of either businessmen or criminals, depending upon how you point of view. I dressed my client in overalls and a flannel shirt, and he went to sleep during the course of the trial. For 9 weeks, the case was on trial.
He must have been well rested.
He was terrifically well rested. And I asked no questions except halfway through the trial, I was bored. I was sitting there literally reading a book in front of the jury because I was showing my non-participation. I got up in front of the last witness before the court, and I said, "Mr. Witness," in a stage whisper, "do you know my client?" And they said, "Counselor," like the jurors, almost on cue, "Counselor, can you speak up?" And I said, "I don't want to wake my client." The jury laughed, and they left him right out of the court. Everybody else was convicted. My client walked. You have to separate your client from the herd. You got to make him look and appear differently in every manner, shape, or form. Is it trick and device? You tell me.
I guess it worked. I don't know. Maybe I'll tell you. Listen, this is something that I know you're very proud of, and you over the years, I mean, whether it be Jay-Z or Ja Rule or Funkmaster Flex.
Or DMX.
Or DMX, you've defended them all. This is the latest edition of, what is that,
L magazine.
XXL magazine. And right there, somebody's daughter is in there as attorney to the stars.
Absolutely.
This is, you can tell us the story.
My daughter Stacy.
That's your daughter Stacy. Stacy Richmond is an attorney, and she is involved in defending who?
Lil Wayne, Ja Rule, DMX, Jay-Z, Freaky Zeke.
And under what circumstances? Under just kind of everyday stuff? Or
No.
trials?
They were charged with possession of guns in those particular instances, sometimes other cases, narcotics or what have you, and that's our job. We're criminal defense lawyers.
Did I get the wrong Richmond on the show tonight? And maybe I...
Well, you got the older and uglier one, I got to tell you.
Is she a better lawyer than you?
Absolutely.
Is that... Oh, boy, his smile gave
Not
it
a
away.
hesitation there. She's 10 times better than I will be.
What is it that she brings to the courtroom that you don't bring?
Youth.
And that's helpful?
Oh, no, she brings other things. You know, different styles. And it's not one person in one case. Different people feel more comfortable with different lawyers for different reasons. As simple as that.
Murray Richmond, a pleasure to have you. I'm not going to wait another 6 years to invite you back, which tells you a little bit about how old I am, and the show is my guest as well. But it's great to have you, and as other legal things come up, I hope you'll let us call on your expertise.
Thank you, Gary.
Great. Folks, if you have further... Oh, and also WVOX Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. You can hear Don't Worry, Murray, and get a little more. I won't be there asking the questions, but he has a lot to say, I'm sure. If you do have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Now, next Monday night, the man who replaced Pedro Espada Jr. in the state Senate, freshman Senator Gustavo Rivera, will be here. He'll talk about the Kingsbridge Armory, his health initiatives, other Bronx issues, as well as his first year in office. I'll see you then and every Monday night at 9 for Bronx Talk. Thanks to producer Jane Folloro, director Michael Arias, Dina. Is Dina here tonight? I didn't even notice. She's so quiet. And our cast of thousands who are around us and up in the booth. And to you, good night. I don't know. Is Dina here tonight?
Your voice, your views, your vision.